everyone, this is Mr. Zanoni, and today we're going to be talking about both the percent proportion and the percent equation in notes. Before we do anything, we need to review that percents are out of 100, and 100% equals 1. If I'm converting from a percent to a decimal, we move the decimal place to the left twice. So we take our decimal point, which is right next to the percent sign most of the time, and we move it to the left twice, and we get rid of the percent sign, and we're moving it to the left because decimal ends in an L. It's a little trick to remember that. To convert a decimal to a percent, we move the decimal place to the right twice. So we start here, we move that decimal place twice to the right, and we put it in a percent sign because there's an R in it. Essentially, when you're converting from a percent to a decimal, you are dividing by 100. When you are converting a decimal to a percent, you are multiplying by 100 and giving it a percent sign. Let's think of one pizza. One pizza is the whole. A slice is the part. So one pizza is the whole. A slice of the pizza is part of the pizza. I can also think of what percent of the pizza the slice is. Okay. The slice is a percent of the whole. I want you to write that down. When you see the word is, that tells you that information is the part. When you see the word of, that tells you that it's the whole, and obviously the percent is the percent. Okay? And usually it's is over of equals percent over 100 because all percents are out of 100. To solve a percent proportion, I need to know 3 out of 4 of these pieces of information. Or you could also know it as part over whole equals percent over 100. Okay, and we just talked about solving proportions with cross products in our last unit, so you should already know how to do that. Okay? In a percent proportion, one ratio or fraction compares part of a quantity to the whole quantity. The other ratio is the equivalent percent written as a fraction with a denominator of 100. The percent proportion is below. 4 out of 5 is 80%. 4 is the part. Word of tells me 5 is the whole, and 80% is 80 over 100. That's how I would set this up. Again, the percent proportion is referenced here in your note sheet. Okay, using the percent proportion to find the percent, the part, or the whole. So we already know the answer because I have the example up here, but let's talk about how we'd set this up. 4 is what percent of 5? The word is tells me 4 is the part. The word of tells me 5 is the whole. And I don't know the percent because that's what I'm looking for. And I would set up the percent proportion as the part is 4 over the whole is 5 equals x is the percent over 100 because all percents are out of 100. Okay. Let's say I was looking for the part instead. The question would be, what number is 80% of 5? The word of tells me 5 is the whole. What is, that tells me I don't know the part, and obviously I have a percentage here, so that would be 80% out of 100. You'll notice that 100 will be in each of these proportions because all percents are out of 100. That's a fact you always know. Last one is finding the whole, how we would set up the percent proportion from the question. 4 is 80% of what number? Of what means I don't know the whole. 4 is, the word is tells me 4 is the part, and 80% tells me the percent. And again, we'd solve this with cross products. So 80 times W equals 4 times 100 you have to show that workout because cross products are equal. If you don't show that workout, you don't show me that you understand that cross products are equal. 80W equals 400. Solve a one-step equation by undoing PEMDAS. So we undo multiplication with division, and we get W equals 5. All right. You're going to try these problems with percent proportion in the Edpuzzle while you're watching. So, okay. I'm going to go over a word problem with you. The other thing I want to just quickly talk about is percentages can be greater than 100%. It doesn't happen a lot of the time, but it can. So you just need to be careful about that. Okay. I'll go over that later. Okay. The average adult male Western lowland gorilla eats about 33.5 pounds of fruit each day. How much food does the average adult male gorilla eat each day? So the other thing I'm going to use is this table over here with their diet. Their fruit makes up 67% of their diet. So now I got to figure out, is this the part of the whole? Is this all the food they're eating or only part of the food they're eating? Well, it's actually only part of the food they're eating because it only makes up 67% of their diet. So I want to figure out the whole. So that's what I'm looking for. I know 33.5 pounds is the part. I know 67%, and I always know that all percents are out of 100, and I can set up my percent proportion. So 33.5 over the whole, because I don't know it, equals 67 over 100. When I'm finding the whole, I like to use W. You can use X, it doesn't matter. When I find the part, I like to use P for percent, and then when I'm looking for when I'm finding the part, I like to use P for part. When I'm looking for the percent, I like to use X. It doesn't really matter what you end up using as long as you use a variable for the unknown. Anyway, 33.5 is the part, over W, that's the whole, because we don't know it. 67 over 100, because it was 67%, and all percents are out of 100. Solve with cross products, 33.5 times 100 equals 67 times W. When I multiply those together, I get 3,350 equals 67W. To isolate W, I need to undo PEMDAS, because I'm solving for a variable. I don't know one of the numbers. So I'm going to undo multiplication with division, divide by 67 on both sides to get W equals 50. I don't want to know what 67 W's is worth. I want to know just what 1 W is worth. How do I get from 67 to 1? I would have to divide both sides by 67. If I do something to one side of an equation, to keep it balanced, I have to do it to the other. W equals 50. So the average adult male gorilla eats 50 pounds of food each day. And that would be my solution. All right, so that's percent proportion. Now we're going to transition to percent equation. Percent proportion uses fractions. Percent equation is going to use decimals. Personally, I would like you to use percent equation eventually. And on an formative, I will require you to both show me that you can use both the percent proportion and the percent equation specifically on questions. Okay? So you need to know how to do both. I'm going to show you where the percent equation comes from. It actually comes from the percent proportion, and I'm going to show you algebraically how it comes to be, or mathematically, if that makes you feel any better. Okay, so the percent proportion is part over whole equals percent over 100. I wonder if there's an easier way to solve for the part, whole, or percent. Well, there is. I can change the percent proportion into a one-step equation, which we call the percent equation. So part over whole equals percent over 100. If I take a percent and divide by 100, like we discussed on the other side, it turns into a decimal. So the part over the whole equals the percent as a decimal. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate the part by multiplying both sides by the whole. And the whole should never be 0, because that just wouldn't make any sense. So I can do this, and then I get the part equals the whole times the percent as a decimal. Actually, it's really the percent is a decimal times the whole, but order doesn't matter with multiplication, but that's usually how it is, okay? This is a legal mathematical move because the whole should never be 0, which means I can multiply both sides by the whole. And I don't have to worry about multiplying by 0. Okay, the percent equation is part equals percent as a decimal times the whole. I'm going to just fix that down here. I think I wrote it this way because this takes up so much space, but technically it doesn't matter. But when I go to do the work, I'm going to set it up this way. So, okay, find the percent. 15 is what percent of 60? 15 is the part, so it goes here by itself. What percent? Don't know it. Of 60, so 60 is the whole. The part is a percentage of the whole. That's how this should be set up. Now, 15 equals x times 60. To solve this, we divide both sides by 60. And x would equal 1/4. Sorry, would equal 0.25. Can I leave my answer like this? No, I'm looking for the percent. I would then need to convert it to a percent by moving that decimal place twice to the right, and I would get 25% as my answer. This is the only one that we have to do more work on when we're solving, is at the end is when we're finding a percent. We have to convert it from a decimal to a percentage. And it's okay if you end up with something like you had 0.385, you moved it twice and get 38.5%. That's okay. It's not the answer to this, but this is just okay. Like, if you get an answer that looks like that, that's not something to worry about. Let's talk about finding the part. What is 25% of 60? So, I don't know the part, equals. Instead of 25%, I'm going to change it to decimal by moving that decimal place twice, so I do the work up front to turn this into 0.25. Of 60, 60 is the whole, and then I just multiply these together, and I get p equals 15. And I found the part. Again, you're doing the work up front here with the converting between a decimal and a percent and a decimal. Now find the whole. 15 is, that means 15 is the part, 25% of what number? So the part is 15 equals, again, we got to convert 25% in the beginning to a decimal. So 0.25, the whole. To solve this, I want to get w by itself, which means I need to divide both sides by 0.25 because that's what I'm multiplying by. When I do that, I get the whole equals 60. And because this is an equation, the really cool thing is I can double check my answer. What is 60 times 0.25? That would be 15. And again, up here, I could also double check my answer by doing 0.25 times 60 is 15. I just have to remember that I had to convert this to a percent. And that's the percent equation. Oops, wrong one. Okay. And these three examples are finding the different ones, which I literally just took the time to do in that last table, so we don't need to worry about that. There is one more question that I definitely need to go over. So try these problems using a percent proportion below. What percent of 25 is 20? Oh, nope, that's not the one I wanted. Wait a minute. Okay, we're coming to the back. Okay. I'm going to do number 7 with you, and then the rest will be in the ed puzzle. So 120% of what number is 45? So I know 45 is the part. I don't know the whole, and I know it's 120% of some number, and all percents are out of 100. So I can either set up the percent proportion Oh, it says solve using the percent equation, so Mr. Zanoni wasn't paying attention. Well, that's the percent proportion if we were going to use that, but we need to follow the directions. So, the part is 45. The percent needs to be turned into a decimal, so I'm going to move that twice to make this 1.20 times the whole. To solve this, I'll divide both sides by 1.20, and I get W equals 37.5. And if you're not comfortable with the percent equation, you could use the percent proportion to double check. 45 times 100 divided by 120, and I still get 37.5 as my answer. Okay. The whole was smaller than the part. Now, normally, this wouldn't make sense because the percent is less than 100%. However, in this case, because the percent is bigger than 100%, the part should be larger than the whole. And that's it for this Edpuzzle. Thank you for watching.